The sun had barely risen, casting soft golden light across the tops of the dense forest. The air was thick with the smell of wet leaves and earth, and a faint mist clung to the undergrowth. The explorer moved slowly, carefully placing each step to avoid disturbing the hidden life of the forest. His backpack was heavy with tools, maps, and notebooks, but the excitement of exploring uncharted territory pushed him forward. He had spent years mapping forests, but today felt different. Today there was a strange pull, a feeling that something extraordinary awaited him. As he walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and the canopy thicker, letting in only slivers of sunlight. The sounds of birds and rustling leaves filled the air, but there was a certain silence that was unusual, almost as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He paused occasionally to take notes, jotting down the types of trees and unusual formations of rocks. His compass spun slightly, as if the forest was resisting precise navigation. It was in one of these moments, when he paused to examine a twisted oak, that he saw it. At first, it was just a flash of metal through the trees, catching the sunlight in a way that made it stand out from the earthy browns and greens. He squinted, adjusting his eyes, thinking it might be a piece of old machinery or perhaps a forgotten cabin. But as he stepped closer, pushing aside thick vines and branches, the shape became clearer. It was enormous, much larger than any building or machine he had ever seen in the forest. The outline suggested something unimaginable, something out of place in the middle of dense woodland. Heart pounding with a mixture of fear and curiosity, he moved closer. The forest seemed to react to his presence, the wind whispering through the trees, leaves rustling as if warning him to turn back. And yet he could not. There was a magnetic pull drawing him forward. The metal structure shimmered in the morning light, and as he came closer, he realized with a shock that it was not a building. It was a cruise ship, enormous and impossibly out of place. Its hull was partially covered with moss and vines, and the forest floor had risen around it, almost trying to claim it as its own. He stopped, unable to speak, his mind racing. How could a cruise ship end up in the middle of a forest? He circled it slowly, his eyes wide as he examined the massive vessel. Trees had grown around it, branches brushing against its sides, and small plants had taken root in its crevices. The paint was faded, peeling in places, and rust streaked the hull like tears running down a cheek. It looked abandoned, yet there was something eerie about the way it sat there, untouched in its grandeur. He noticed details that made his heart skip a beat. The windows, though grimy and partially broken, gave glimpses into the interior. There were decks and railings, staircases leading to higher floors, and even lifeboats still attached, hanging at awkward angles. The size of it was staggering, stretching far beyond what he had imagined. Every step he took around the ship seemed to echo in the silent forest. It was a giant sleeping in the woods, forgotten by the world, yet somehow preserved by it. Curiosity overcame caution, and he looked for a way inside. He found a slightly ajar hatch near the lower deck, partially hidden by thick vines. The edges were rusted, but it opened with a creak that echoed through the quiet trees. He took a deep breath, adjusting his backpack, and climbed inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old wood and metal filled his nose. Sunlight filtered in through broken windows, illuminating the interior in a ghostly glow. The inside was astonishing. Cabins lined the walls, each with furniture covered in thin layers of dust. A grand staircase led up to another deck, its polished wood worn but still impressive. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, dulled by years of neglect. It was as if time had paused the moment the ship had been abandoned. He walked slowly, careful not to disturb anything, his footsteps echoing on the metal floor. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the structure. Every corner he turned revealed more wonders. A dining area with long tables and chairs, a grand piano covered in dust, and a lounge with sofas and coffee tables. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and aged wood, but there was a strange beauty in the decay. The explorer could not help but run his fingers over the furniture, imagining the people who had once filled these spaces with laughter and conversation. There were signs of life long gone, menus still on tables, newspapers folded and left behind, and faded photographs pinned to the walls. Each item told a story, yet left questions unanswered. He moved to the windows, pushing aside cobwebs, and looked out. The forest pressed in close, branches brushing against the glass. It was hard to believe that such a massive ship could exist so far from water. His mind raced with possibilities. Could it have been transported here for secret reasons? Was it part of an experiment, or had it simply been forgotten over time? The questions seemed endless, but the answers remained elusive. Time passed differently inside the ship. He moved from deck to deck, each revealing more of its story. There were cabins with personal belongings still inside, books with pages yellowed and fragile, and even a small kitchen with utensils neatly arranged. It was surreal, like stepping into a frozen world. The forest outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant compared to the immense mystery surrounding him. He paused in the middle of the grand lounge, taking out his notebook and sketching what he saw. The details were important, he reminded himself. Every creak, every piece of furniture, every sign of human presence might hold a clue to how this ship ended up here. He took photographs, careful to capture the untouched beauty of the interior. The more he explored, the more he realized the ship was not just abandoned, it was preserved, a strange monument to something forgotten. A sudden noise startled him, a small crash from the upper deck. His heart raced and he froze, listening. The forest outside seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment he wondered if he was not alone. But the sound was fleeting, just the settling of the old structure, a reminder that even in stillness time moved in quiet ways. He continued his exploration, more cautious now, aware that the ship could be unstable yet too intrigued to stop. Hours passed as he moved through the corridors, documenting every detail. He found markings on some walls, faded and almost indecipherable, and wondered if they were messages, dates, or simple graffiti left by those who once walked these halls. The thought of the ship's history weighed on him. So many questions, so few answers. How long had it been here? Who had abandoned it and why? The forest had kept its secret for decades, perhaps longer, and now it had been revealed to him alone. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the broken windows, he realized it was time to leave. The forest around the ship seemed darker, more menacing, and he did not want to be trapped inside once night fell. He climbed back out through the hatch, taking one last look at the immense vessel. The forest had claimed it, yet it remained a monument to human achievement, lost and forgotten. Walking away, he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The ship in the forest was more than a mystery. It was a story frozen in time. He made mental notes of where it was located, planning to return with proper equipment and perhaps a team. But for now he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would haunt his thoughts for years. The forest had shared its secret with him, and he had seen a world untouched by time, hidden in plain sight. The forest closed behind him, the sunlight fading, but the image of the massive cruise ship remained vivid in his mind. He walked faster now, his backpack feeling lighter despite its weight. The day had given him a gift, a story waiting to be told, and he knew that this discovery was only the beginning. The forest and the ship had whispered their secrets, and he had listened. And in that moment he understood that some discoveries were not just about what was found, but about the journey it took to uncover them. The next morning, the explorer returned to the ship with a sense of determination. The forest had seemed alive the day before, but now, in the soft morning light, it felt quieter, almost respectful, as if acknowledging the importance of his return. He approached the vessel carefully, scanning the surrounding area for any obstacles or changes. The mist hung low, curling around the hull like delicate tendrils. It gave the ship an almost mystical aura, making it seem larger, more impossible than before. He checked the hatch he had entered through yesterday. It creaked as he pushed it open, and a chill of air escaped, carrying the musty smell of the interior. The explorer took a deep breath, adjusted his backpack, and stepped inside. The dust from the floor rose slightly with each step, catching the light in thin rays. The grand lounge where he had left off the day before welcomed him like a frozen time capsule. Every chair, every table, every decoration told a story of a life once vibrant, now paused indefinitely. He moved cautiously along the corridor, his eyes scanning the walls and floors for anything unusual. It became clear that the ship was more than just abandoned, it was preserved. He noticed small details that suggested careful maintenance long after it had been placed in the forest. A painting on one wall had survived almost untouched, colors still vibrant despite years of dust. The explorer took out his notebook, sketching the layout of the lounge, marking points of interest. He wanted a record, a detailed account of the ship's interior before he uncovered anything more significant. Moving deeper, he found the dining area. The tables were long and arranged in perfect order. Plates and cutlery were still in place, covered in layers of dust. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals catching the dim light and scattering it into faint reflections on the walls. He ran his fingers gently along the edge of a table, imagining what it would have been like during meal service, with laughter and conversation filling the space. The contrast between that imagined life and the current silence was striking. It was eerie but captivating. As he explored the lounge, he found a small spiral staircase leading up to the upper deck. Each step groaned under his weight, but the wood seemed surprisingly sturdy. Reaching the top, he found himself in a hallway lined with cabins. He paused outside one door, peering through a broken window. Inside, a room that seemed like it belonged to a passenger remained intact. A small bed was neatly made. A suitcase lay open as though someone had just stepped away. Clothes were still folded in drawers, and a journal rested on a small desk. The explorer felt a shiver run down his spine. Who had lived here, and why had they left so suddenly? He stepped inside carefully, mindful of the fragile floorboards. Picking up the journal, he flipped through the pages. The writing was faded but legible. It spoke of a journey, excitement for an adventure, and small notes about daily life aboard the ship. There were entries about meals, entertainment, and conversations with other passengers. What struck him most was the sudden stop in entries. One day, the journal ended abruptly. There were no explanations, no hints about what had happened, only empty pages after that point. The mystery deepened. The ship, in all its grandeur, held lives frozen in time. And the explorer was beginning to understand how strange and rare this discovery truly was. He continued down the hallway, opening doors carefully, each revealing another layer of the ship's past. Some cabins were simple, functional, with personal items scattered neatly. Others were lavish, with plush carpets, ornate furniture, and intricate decorations. The explorer paused at each one, taking photographs and notes documenting the differences. It was clear that the ship had catered to a range of passengers, from ordinary travelers to wealthy guests. Each room told a story, and he felt a strange connection to the people who had once walked these corridors. Moving towards the center of the ship, he found a staircase leading to the lower deck. The air grew colder, heavier, and a faint metallic scent filled his nose. This area seemed more utilitarian. Crew quarters, storage rooms, and maintenance areas. He could imagine the hustle of activity that had once filled these spaces. The contrast between the luxurious upper decks and the functional lower decks fascinated him. It painted a complete picture of life aboard the ship, from opulence to everyday work. In one storage room, he found stacks of supplies, canned food, bottles of water, and crates labeled with dates decades old. Everything was surprisingly intact. The explorer wondered if the ship had been prepared for a long voyage, or if these were remnants left behind when it was moved. The condition of the supplies suggested care, almost as if someone had intended to return but never did. It was a puzzle, each piece more confounding than the last. He continued through the lower deck, eventually reaching the kitchen. Large stoves, sinks, and counters filled the space, and even the utensils were still neatly arranged. A smell of stale air mixed with the faint scent of old food lingered, making the room feel both inviting and unwelcoming at the same time. He opened cabinets and drawers, finding old recipe books, cooking utensils, and small notes left by the crew. There was a human touch in these details, reminders that this ship had been alive with activity, even if now it was silent. As he moved further, the explorer came across a small theater. The seats were plush but dusty, arranged in perfect rows facing a small stage. He could imagine performances, gatherings, and laughter filling this space, entertaining passengers during long voyages. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, streaming through the cracked windows, giving the theater an almost magical appearance. The explorer felt a mixture of awe and sadness, knowing that these moments were long gone, yet preserved in the stillness around him. On the far side of the theater, he noticed a set of stairs leading to what seemed like the captain's quarters. The door was larger, more ornate than the cabin doors, and slightly ajar. The explorer's pulse quickened as he approached. Pushing the door open slowly, he stepped inside and was met with a room that spoke of authority and responsibility. A large desk sat against one wall, paper scattered as if abandoned in haste. Maps and charts lined the walls, and a small bed occupied a corner of the room. It was a command center frozen in time. He examined the desk, carefully going through the papers. Among them was a logbook, filled with notes from the captain and crew. The handwriting was neat, detailing daily activities, routes, and passenger interactions. What caught his attention was a set of entries about unusual events, the ship being moved, experiments, and secret instructions. The entries were cryptic, never explaining fully, but they hinted at the extraordinary circumstances that had brought the ship to this forest. He copied notes and photographs, realizing that this logbook might hold the key to understanding the ship's mysterious history. Exploring further, he discovered a small observation deck. From here he could look out through the broken windows to the forest surrounding the ship. Trees pressed close, branches scraping against the metal, and vines wrapped around railings as if claiming ownership. The contrast between the wild forest and the preserved ship fascinated him. It was a collision of human engineering and nature, a frozen moment where the two worlds met. He spent some time here, sketching the view, feeling the weight of the discovery settle over him. The explorer moved carefully back through the corridors, retracing his steps to ensure he had documented everything. Every room, every hallway, every small detail mattered. The ship was a storybook, and he was piecing together the narrative. The further he explored, the more he understood that this was not a simple abandonment. There was intention behind the preservation, a purpose that had been lost over time, and he felt a growing responsibility to uncover it. He spent the remainder of the day exploring the decks he had not yet reached, including the pool area and sun deck. The pool was drained, its tiles cracked but still reflecting the sunlight. Chairs and loungers were arranged neatly, as if waiting for guests who would never return. The sun deck offered a view over the forest canopy, the ship towering above the trees, impossibly large, a giant misplaced in the wilderness. The explorer felt a mix of awe and disbelief. Each discovery raised new questions, yet each answer deepened the mystery. As evening approached, he realized it was time to leave. The forest shadows lengthened and a chill settled over the ship. Carefully, he descended to the lower deck and exited through the hatch. The night air was cool and fresh, and the forest seemed to welcome him back, embracing the secrets he carried with him. He took one last look at the ship, its silhouette dark against the fading light, and promised himself he would return. Walking back through the forest, he replayed every moment, every detail in his mind. The ship was more than a discovery. It was a time capsule, a frozen world of human life intertwined with nature. He knew that his work had just begun. The logs, the journals, the cabins, and every small item were pieces of a puzzle that demanded patience and careful study. He felt a sense of responsibility to share the story, but also to protect it. This ship, stranded in the forest, held secrets that had survived decades, and he had been entrusted to bring them into the light. The explorer returned to the forest early the next day, the morning air crisp and filled with the scent of damp earth. The mist clung to the ground, curling around the bases of the trees like a ghostly sea. His mind was still racing from the previous day's discoveries, and every step he took toward the ship filled him with anticipation. Today, he resolved, he would dig deeper. He would search for clues, anomalies, anything that could explain why such an enormous ship sat silently in the middle of the forest. As he approached, the ship appeared even more surreal in the early light. The mist wrapped around its hull, giving the massive vessel an almost dreamlike quality. The explorer paused, taking in the view, feeling both awe and disbelief. He pushed open the hatch and stepped inside. The musty air welcomed him, thick with the smell of old wood and metal. Dust motes danced in the light, streaming through broken windows. He began moving through the corridors, careful to keep track of every detail. Each room was a frozen snapshot of the past, yet today he hoped to find things he had missed before. He returned to the captain's quarters first, drawn by the logbooks and papers he had seen yesterday. As he flipped through the pages again, he noticed entries that he hadn't read closely before. There were references to unusual shipments and strange orders, instructions to keep the ship's movements secret, and notes about testing equipment on board. The handwriting was neat, but the content cryptic. The explorer made careful copies and photographs, realizing that these entries hinted at something extraordinary, but left too many questions unanswered. Leaving the captain's quarters, he wandered toward the main hallways, examining cabins he had previously passed by. In one, he discovered a wall with markings that were faint but deliberate. Symbols and numbers were etched lightly into the wood. He traced them with his fingers, trying to decipher their meaning. Some seemed like coordinates. Others looked like dates. The explorer jotted them down, wondering if they were related to the ship's journey or the people aboard. The markings added another layer of mystery, suggesting that whoever had been here had left a message, but one not meant to be easily understood. As he moved to the next cabin, he found something even more unusual. A small desk drawer locked with a rusty latch contained a collection of photographs. Most were of the passengers, smiling and unaware of the strange fate awaiting them. One photograph, however, was odd, a picture of the ship in a harbor, but the surrounding area looked different, unfamiliar. The photograph was dated decades ago and the harbor seemed deserted. The explorer studied it carefully, wondering if it was a clue about the ship's origins or its mysterious inland journey. He placed it in his notebook for later analysis. Exploring further, he reached the dining hall. It was silent and still, but he noticed faint scratches on the tables, patterns that looked intentional. He bent down to examine them closely, running his fingers along the grooves. They were not random. Someone had written something here long ago. He could make out fragments of words and numbers. Carefully, he recorded them, feeling the thrill of uncovering secrets that had been hidden for decades. The dining hall, once a place of joy and conversation, had become a canvas for messages from the past. Curiosity drove him to the lower decks again, toward the crew quarters and storage rooms. The air grew cooler and more oppressive as he moved through these areas. He examined the storage rooms more thoroughly than before, noticing small details he had missed: crates with labels in foreign languages, sealed containers with unclear contents, and equipment that seemed out of place for a normal cruise ship. The explorer speculated about their purpose. Were these part of experiments, special cargo, or just supplies for a long voyage? Each item deepened the mystery. In the crew quarters, he found personal belongings that had been left behind: shoes neatly arranged, clothes folded, and small items placed with care. It was clear that the crew had lived here, yet there were no signs of departure. Everything had been left as if they intended to return. The explorer felt a pang of empathy. These were real people, lives interrupted, stories frozen in time. He carefully photographed each cabin, knowing that these images might one day help piece together the larger picture of what had happened. Moving toward the engine room, he encountered the faintest echoes of the past. Machinery stood silent, coated in dust and rust. Pipes and levers that had once powered the ship now hung idle, some broken, some intact. The explorer examined the area with fascination, imagining the noise, the movement, the life that had once filled this space. He noticed small notations on the machinery written in faded ink. They looked like instructions or maintenance logs, yet they were incomplete. The fragments hinted at a more complex purpose than he had imagined, suggesting that the ship had been more than a simple passenger vessel. After leaving the engine room, he climbed a staircase to a small observation deck he had not explored before. From here he could see the forest stretching endlessly in every direction. The ship's size was even more apparent from this vantage point, and the contrast between the massive vessel and the surrounding wilderness was breathtaking. He sat for a moment sketching the view, trying to capture the feeling of being in this impossible place. The forest had grown around the ship, yet it had not consumed it, leaving it as a silent testament to human ingenuity and the passage of time. He decided to investigate the ship's theater once more. The seats were covered in dust, the stage empty, but the space seemed charged with a strange energy. He moved closer to the stage, examining the floorboards. Small scratches and dents hinted at movement, performances, or activity long ago. One area of the stage had a faint outline of a circle, as if something had been placed there repeatedly. He documented the details, realizing that even the smallest observations could be clues to the ship's story. Next, he returned to the upper decks. The pool area, drained and cracked, revealed faint marks along the tiles. He followed them, curious if they were natural wear or something intentional. Some scratches seemed too precise to be random, suggesting that someone had used this space for reasons beyond simple recreation. He noted every detail, photographing patterns and peculiarities. The sun reflected off the metal railings, highlighting rust patterns that resembled maps or diagrams. He couldn't be sure, but the shapes were intriguing. He explored the sun deck further, examining every railing, every piece of furniture. Chairs were still lined up, some overturned, some intact. Tables had marks, scratches, and stains that hinted at long-forgotten activities. He could almost see the passengers here, enjoying the sun, laughing, talking, unaware of the secrets surrounding them. The explorer felt a mix of nostalgia and unease. The ship had been frozen in a moment of life, yet something about it felt unnatural, deliberate, and strange. The explorer then revisited the journals he had collected. He compared handwriting, dates, and notes, trying to piece together the sequence of events. Certain patterns emerged, references to secrecy, unusual orders, and unexplained shipments. The more he read, the clearer it became that this was not an ordinary cruise ship. There were hints of experimental projects, mysterious instructions, and cryptic messages. The logbooks and journals were a window into a hidden world, one that had left the ship abandoned in the forest but remarkably intact. As he continued to explore, he found a small storage closet he had overlooked. Inside, there were crates filled with unmarked objects. Some were mechanical parts, others appeared to be containers of unknown substances. The explorer took careful photographs documenting each crate and its contents. He realized that understanding these items might be crucial to solving the puzzle of the ship's journey and purpose. The combination of passenger life and these unusual objects deepened the mystery, making him even more determined to uncover the truth. Hours passed as he moved through the ship, piecing together fragments of its past. He documented cabins, decks, and unusual markings. Each discovery raised new questions, but he remained methodical, knowing that the key to understanding the ship lay in attention to detail. The interplay of human life, engineering, and secrecy created a narrative that was both fascinating and confounding. He felt as though he were walking through a museum of lost memories, each corner revealing a story frozen in time. Toward the end of the day, he climbed back to the observation deck. The forest below was bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon, the shadows long and deep. He took a final series of sketches, capturing the contrast between the massive ship and the surrounding wilderness. It was a strange, almost surreal moment, a reminder that this vessel was an anomaly, a human artifact preserved in nature's embrace. The explorer felt a mix of awe, curiosity, and responsibility. He was uncovering something extraordinary, something that had been hidden for decades, and he knew that each step brought him closer to understanding. Yet the full picture remained elusive. As he prepared to leave, he took one last walk through the main corridor. He glanced into the cabins, the dining hall, and the grand lounge, committing each detail to memory. The ship's interior was a maze of human experience and enigma, a place that had witnessed joy, work, secrecy, and abandonment. The morning light barely penetrated the thick canopy of the forest as the explorer made his way toward the ship again. A quiet tension had settled in the air, and even the birds seemed to hold their songs in anticipation. Today, he felt, would be different. The fragments of mystery he had uncovered yesterday hinted at something bigger, something that had been hidden in the ship for decades, waiting for someone to notice. His mind raced with possibilities and his steps quickened, eager to uncover what lay inside. He reached the hatch and pushed it open slowly, the familiar creak echoing through the interior. The air inside smelled of old wood, metal, and dust, carrying with it the weight of years. The grand lounge greeted him again, bathed in soft morning light filtering through cracked windows. He paused for a moment, taking in the sight, then moved toward the areas he had not fully explored. Each step made the floorboards groan under his weight, reminding him of the fragile state of the vessel. The upper decks drew him first. Where cabins he had glanced at before now seemed to hold hidden details he had missed. He opened doors with care, discovering small notes tucked into drawers, some written in haste, others carefully recorded. There were instructions, reminders, and fragments of conversations. The handwriting varied, suggesting multiple authors. The explorer copied everything, feeling a growing sense that these scattered writings might reveal the story of the ship's sudden disappearance from public knowledge. In one cabin, he discovered a small safe partially hidden beneath a pile of old linens. The lock was rusted but not impossible. With careful effort, he managed to open it, revealing papers and objects that seemed highly unusual. Among them were letters, a few photographs, and a small mechanical device whose purpose he could not immediately discern. The letters hinted at secrecy and experimentation, mentioning names and locations that were unfamiliar. The explorer carefully documented everything, aware that these artifacts might hold the key to understanding the strange events surrounding the ship. He moved on, descending to the lower decks where the crew quarters and storage rooms lay. The air here was heavier, the scent of metal and old machinery more pronounced. As he explored the storage rooms, he noticed small inconsistencies he had overlooked before. Crates that were supposed to contain food held mechanical components. Containers labeled with mundane items like tools and cleaning supplies hid materials whose purpose was unclear. The explorer examined each crate meticulously, taking photographs and notes, determined not to miss any detail. The engine room beckoned next. It was quiet, eerily so, but the explorer could sense the energy of the space as it had once been. Pipes, levers, and machinery stood silent, yet signs of past activity were everywhere. Small notations on the walls and machines hinted at experiments, adjustments, and measurements that were highly specific. He felt a mixture of fascination and unease. Whoever had run this ship had been meticulous, and the purpose of their work was still shrouded in mystery. He made sketches of the machinery, noting every anomaly and peculiarity. Moving further into the lower decks, he stumbled upon a narrow hallway he had never explored. The walls were lined with doors, some slightly ajar, others sealed tight. One door at the end of the hallway caught his attention. Unlike the others, it had markings etched into the wood, symbols that seemed deliberate and strange. As he approached, a sudden creak echoed from above, making him freeze. For a moment, the silence of the forest and the ship pressed in from all sides. Then he slowly opened the door. Inside, he found what looked like a small laboratory. Old instruments and equipment were scattered across counters, glass containers covered in dust and papers strewn about. Some of the devices appeared complex, with wires and gears that suggested intricate functions. There were notebooks filled with diagrams, notes, and calculations. The explorer examined them closely, realizing that this ship had been more than a passenger vessel. It had served as a mobile experiment of some kind. The thought sent chills down his spine. He was standing in a place where history had taken a strange and deliberate turn, leaving this massive vessel stranded in the forest. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the upper decks. The explorer's heart leapt and he froze, listening. The sound of shifting metal and breaking wood was unmistakable. He realized that parts of the ship were unstable, weakened by years of neglect. Moving too quickly could trigger a collapse. He forced himself to remain calm, calculating his movements carefully. Every step now carried the weight of potential danger, but he could not abandon his exploration. The mysteries of this vessel demanded attention, and he was determined to uncover them. He decided to return to the upper decks to investigate the source of the noise. Climbing the stairs carefully, he noticed that some railings were loose, some floorboards sagging. The ship had survived decades in the forest, but it was fragile. When he reached the area near the crash, he saw that a section of railing had given way, falling to the deck below. He breathed a sigh of relief that it had not injured him, but the incident served as a stark reminder of the risks he faced. He would need to be careful, or he might become trapped inside this forgotten giant. Continuing along the upper deck, he came across cabins that seemed more private, possibly reserved for higher-ranking passengers. Inside, he discovered more documents and photographs, some showing the ship in its original environment, docked in harbors, others showing unfamiliar machinery and strange symbols. He took notes, photographing everything. Each discovery added pieces to the puzzle, but also introduced new questions. The ship's history was layered, complex, and intentionally obscured. As he moved toward the observation deck, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A small shadow flickered across one of the broken windows. He froze, straining to see if it was an animal, a trick of the light, or something else entirely. The forest pressed against the ship from outside, yet the movement seemed too deliberate. He decided to investigate cautiously, his eyes scanning every corner. The shadow did not return, but the encounter left him more alert, more aware of the fragile boundary between the ship's interior and the outside world. The observation deck offered a breathtaking view of the forest surrounding the ship. From here, he could see the immense scale of the vessel, dwarfing the trees that had grown around it. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating shifting patterns on the metal and wooden decks. The explorer sketched the scene, trying to capture the interplay between the human-made structure and the encroaching wilderness. It was a visual reminder that the ship was an anomaly, a massive creation out of place, frozen in time yet vulnerable to the slow reclaiming forces of nature. Feeling a mix of exhilaration and caution, He moved to the theater, where he had spent time the day before. The seats were still dusty, the stage empty, yet he noticed small footprints in the dust near the entrance. They were faint but recent, suggesting that someone or something had been there not long ago. His pulse quickened and he scanned the room, searching for any sign of life. There was nothing, yet the footprints remained a chilling reminder that the ship, though abandoned, was not entirely isolated. He photographed the prints and made detailed notes, aware that this new development added a layer of urgency to his exploration. The explorer then returned to the lower decks, focusing on the storage rooms. He examined crates and containers again, paying close attention to markings and labels. Some were in languages he did not recognize. Others contained items that defied easy categorization. He realized that understanding these objects might be key to uncovering the true purpose of the ship and its unexpected journey into the forest. Each item was carefully documented, photographed, and sketched. Hours passed as he moved through the ship, each discovery heightening his sense of wonder and unease. The combination of human life, engineering, secrecy, and now the unexplained presence of recent activity created a tension that pressed in from all sides. He could feel the weight of history, the echoes of lives once lived, and the lingering presence of secrets long hidden. The ship was no longer just a discovery. It was a living mystery, challenging him to understand it while navigating its physical dangers. As evening approached, the light in the forest began to fade, casting long shadows across the ship. The explorer decided to return to the hatch, knowing that the forest would grow dark and difficult to navigate soon. He moved through the corridors carefully, avoiding weakened floors and unstable railings. His notes, sketches, and photographs were safely stored in his backpack. He took one last look around the lounge and cabins, committing the details to memory. Exiting through the hatch, he stepped into the forest air, which was cool and filled with the scent of leaves and moss. The ship loomed silently behind him, a massive structure holding countless secrets, some discovered, others still hidden. He walked briskly through the trees, reflecting on the day's discoveries and the new questions that had emerged. The forest seemed quieter now, almost contemplative, as if it too was aware of the significance of what had been uncovered. By the time he reached the edge of the forest, twilight had settled in, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple.